Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are starting chapter 37. So, I did hear your comments. I saw some of you saying, that the videos were a little bit too short. So, I'm going to go ahead and do like two or three chapters, and then we're getting to the end. So, if you guys like this, let me know. If you guys want to read another book, let me know. I have an idea for another book. Um, but if you guys have any suggestions, um, I'm open. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Cindi. Thank you so much for joining me. This is not my normal content, but I'm kind of expanding. Let's see, we've got these eclipses happening, so we've got a lot of changes happening in our life, and let's get started. So, does everybody have their chai, tea, their coffee? Are you sitting in your blankie? Uh, and nice and cozy and getting ready. Here we go, chapter 37. I spun around and I pressed my back against the door. I may have also screamed a little. Once I was certain I had not, in fact, had a heart attack, I was able to stammer, "It's you!" Oh, yes, I knew the girl in front of me. There was no mistaking that bright pink hair. The earrings were different, though. Tonight they were in the shape of cats with their black arch. I'm sorry, with their back arched. I couldn't remember her name, though. The fright must have startled it right out of me. "Hi, you." "Nixie," she said, an amused smile. "And hi." I was just. I threw a look back at the door. "What are you doing here?" "I live down the street. I'm staying with my aunt and uncle while I go to school. I thought I saw you speeding by, so I decided to check it out." "Right, right." She looked me up and down. "And you were just—" "I was just, I was just a terrible liar is what I was." "Skulking around Constance Graves' house," she offered. Skulking is an ugly word. What about breaking in? How do you feel about those words? Those are terrible words, just terrible. Are you looking for something that will help Nora? I heard she'd been arrested." I frowned. Once again, I couldn't help but think this girl knew far too much about things she probably shouldn't. "Not arrested, no. They're questioning her." She nodded. "And, again, you think there's something in Constance's house that could help prove Nora's innocence?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "Definitely not." "Why do you have a flashlight, then?" I looked down at the torch in my hand as though it had just appeared there. "And why do you even need a flashlight? Can't you just cast a spell so an orb of light will follow you around?" I blinked at her. "An orb of light? Or a cloud of sparks? Or a flame that rests in the palm of your hand?" She smiled. "That would be super cool." "No, not super cool. Ridiculous. That's all ridiculous." I could actually do the flame in the hand thing, and it was very cool. But no, just no. This was not happening. Besides, I had enough of fires lately. Nixie, I'm not sure what you've heard, but I think you've been misinformed. "Oh, I haven't heard anything other than from Liz, and she's not exactly an unbiased source. You and your aunts have the town locked down. Whenever I try to get anyone to say anything about the Warren women and the help they provide," she put air quotes around the word help, "nobody seems to know what I'm talking about, or, at least, they act that way." I frowned. Right. I didn't want to have I didn't want to have to spell the girl, especially given my difficulties as of late. But this was bad. She obviously knew a lot. Again, too much. And I had things to do tonight. But could I really risk that kind of enchantment with my magic behaving so unpredictably? "You're thinking about wiping my memory, aren't you?" My eyes widened. "What? Wipe your memory? That's crazy," I stammered. "How would I even do something like that?" "Don't bother. You'd be wasting your time." Nora's already tried several times. It doesn't work. I'm immune. Apparently, my aunts still had a few secrets up their sleeves. You're immune? Yeah, I come from a long line of witch hunters. I'm not proud, if that's what you're thinking. I'm actually like super ashamed. But what can I do? You can't pick your family. Anyway, the point is, I don't think your magic works on me. I'm sure, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Sorry, let me say that again. I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. The girl gave me an exaggerated wink. So how are you planning to get in? She asked, eyeing the house. That thing you were doing with your fingers obviously wasn't working. I stared at the girl a moment longer, then said, well, if I was hypothetically breaking in, I guess I'd have to smash a window or something. Smash a window? She blinked. That glass is original. See the way the light swirls in the panes? I didn't look where Nixie was pointing. I was kind of afraid to take my eyes off of her. You are not smashing the window. I planted my hands on my hip. Then I don't know what I'm going to do. Hypothetically speaking, I guess I'll break a door or Nixie held something up in the air. You could just use this, she said with a shrug. Is that a key? It is, and I'll give it to you. She folded her arms across the chest, burying the key underneath her arm. On one condition. Okay, I gave her a sidelong look. What condition? You do magic for me right here, right now. Now we're moving on to chapter 38. What? I had said the word too sharply. I tried to diffuse the situation with a laugh, but I was convincing no one. What is it that magic what is this magic you keep going on about? Again, I was such a terrible liar. And why? Why do you have a key to Constance Graves' house? I am, or was, Constance Graves' neighbor. Why does any neighbor have a key? In case of emergency. I'm assuming this is an emergency. She held out the key again. I nodded. This was most definitely an emergency. I reached out to grab the key, but she yanked her hand away. I said it was going to cost you. How much? I patted my coat. I don't have any money on me, but I could get some. I don't want money. I already told you what I want. It doesn't have to be anything big like turning yourself into a bat. She had me confused with a vampire again. Or making a poison apple. That was the evil queen. Or flying on a broomstick. I didn't have anything for that one, but I did prefer my bicycle. It could just be something small, she pleaded, clutching her hand to her chest, like levitating off the ground or something. I rubbed my forehead. That had been the last night's trick. Look, Nixie, there's been some sort of misunderstanding here. No, stop it. Don't do that. I dropped my hand to look at her. Both you and Nora act like I'm crazy, but I'm not. You know I'm not. I know what I know. My grandfather told me stories when I was little, and I saw something once. Something I definitely can't explain. She shook her head. I just need proof, for my own sake. I felt for the girl. I really did. We both knew the truth, and she was not crazy. Please, I promise I won't tell anyone. There was so much desperate longing in the girl's eyes, it nearly broke my heart. I hear what you're saying. I really do. But you won't do it. She threw her hands in the air. Great. That's just great. I frowned. That's not exactly what I was going to say. Hope lit up in the girl's eyes. What I was going to say was, even if I did want to do this absolutely ridiculous and totally deniable thing you want me to do, I'm not sure I could do it right now. Nixie's face dropped. What are you talking about? I scratched my temple. Well, you see, I've been going through some personal issues, and you noticed it earlier when I was trying to unlock the door. Not much was happening. So what are you saying? You're broken? Hypothetically speaking, yes, kind of. It's an on and off again thing. Seriously? You're telling me I finally get this close to seeing some magic? She pinched her fingers in the air. And my witch is a dud? I blinked. Dud seemed a little harsh. She held the key out to me. I looked at her outstretched hands. Wait, what are you doing? Just take it, she said, jerking it around. Really? Just drop it by the store when you're done. Who knows? Maybe you will find something to prove your aunt's innocence, and she'll show me some magic. Now, Nora, there's a real witch. I scoffed a little, but took the key just the same. Thank you, Nixie. Whatever. She turned and trotted down the front steps of the house. Really? I called out after her. I won't forget this. Yeah, yeah. She kept walking across the dark lawn. And good luck in there. Watch out for ghosts. I clutched the key in my hand and smiled. Always. Minutes later, inside the Graves house with the door shut behind me, I swept the flashlight around the front hall. The interior of the home was clean enough. It wasn't as though there were any cobwebs hanging from the ceilings or dust sheets thrown over dust sheets thrown over furniture, but there was a very sad feel to the place. The furnishings all looked decades old, and the walls and the floors were dull from the lack of maintenance. It was clear no one had thought of this house as a home in a very long time. There was something else missing, too. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then it came to me. It wasn't just that the house had a feeling of neglect. There was no indication of care at all. No family photos, no sign of a pet. There weren't even any plants. Suddenly, a prickle ran over my neck. I couldn't be sure, but I was willing to bet Constance was with me again. Time to get to it. Initially, I had been planning to go directly to the staircase, but there was one thing I needed to check first. I crept down the main hallway, passing just by the kitchen, headed for the back of the house, my footfalls echoing much too loudly for my liking. When I reached the doors that led to the backyard, I was surprised to find them closed off with 2x4s, but the oak board and the batten wall beside them was still in perfect condition. I could have been looking at the wall of Ivywood Hollow, and the similarities didn't end there, even though the paneled interior walls appeared flushed with that of the outside. Through some architectural wizardry, I knew that wasn't quite the case. Thankfully, though, I didn't have to search for the hidden panel to prove my hunch. There was no need. The light from the torch had found the small brass doorknob. I pulled the camouflage section of the wall open to reveal a narrow staircase identical to the one in my family's home. At least one of my suspicions had been confirmed. It wouldn't have been easy for anyone who had lived in this house to find their way quickly through the B&B. I hurried back to the main staircase. I could have taken the secret steps, but in all honesty, they were a little creepy. The entire house was a little creepy, and while it may seem silly, given I was used to being the thing people feared going bump in the night, even witches have their limits. I grabbed the banister so like the one in my family room. This was it, the moment of truth. Stairs above. I hoped Constance hadn't led me here on a wild goose chase, but, as the saying goes, there was only one way to find out. Each step I climbed creaked beneath my feet. When I reached the top, the darkness of the second floor engulfed me, and I found myself wishing I had brought a bigger flashlight. I swept the small circle of illumination I did have over the wall to the left of me, taking small steps as I did. If Roxy was right, and the house was a mirror image of Ivywood Hollow, the closet should be just ahead. I was finding it difficult to judge how far, though. The fear and excitement had me disoriented. I kept the light of my torch moving along the wall. Step after step, it revealed nothing but an uninterrupted flow of wainscoting and faded wallpaper. Panic fluttered my chest. Suddenly, the light hit upon the handcrafted wood casing of the closet door. Without a thought, I raced over, grabbed the handle, and whipped it open again. Whipped it open. My heart sank. More empty shelves. I swooped my flashlight over each one, but the beam revealed nothing. No, this couldn't be right. I had been so sure the closet was identical and Constance had brought me here. There had to be a reason why. I ran my hand over the dusty shelves, feeling for something that might have been left behind, something I couldn't see with the narrow beam of the flashlight. But, again, there was nothing. I looked up to the ceiling. Maybe there was a crawl space. The roof was seamless, not a nook or cranny in sight. My hand dropped to my side, flooding the floor of the small enclosure with light. The floor. The floor. I dropped to my knees. There was a grubby bit of old carpet covering the hardwood. I shone my flashlight behind me and to both sides. It certainly didn't match the carpet I could see. I gave the fabric a sharp pull. It came loose in my hand. My chest tightened as I tossed the little rug aside and pointed the flashlight down at the floor. I choked back a shout. I would never have noticed it had I not admired the woodworking at the B&B earlier. But I had, and now what I saw here was unmistakable. The boards were not flush. There were spaces between the select few, thin lines in the shape of a square. I ran my gloved palm along the floor back into the closet until I hit the wall. I then reached to either side, tiptoeing my fingers along the edge, searching by touch, until I found what I was looking for: hinges. I jerked back on my heels and pressed down on the floor. I sprang up under my touch. It sprang up under my touch, near frantic. I forced my hands underneath the panel of the wood and thrust it up. A small metal box lay tucked in the subfloor. Yes! My voice, though quiet, seemed to ripple through the stillness of the house. I lifted the container, ignoring the cobwebs clinging to the side. I sat back into the cross-legged position and set it down in front of me. It probably wasn't wise to stay in the house any longer than I had to, but I had to know what was inside, now. I jiggled the rusty lid until it came open, creaking in protest. It was filled nearly to the rim with two thick files of paper. I pulled the first out and opened it up. Constance's will. I quickly flipped through it. Even though I wasn't a lawyer, I didn't need to be to see the sole beneficiary of the estate was in fact the town, exactly as Rip had claimed. I pulled out the next folder. Rupert Graves, Sr.'s last will and testament. I read each page carefully this time. By all accounts, this was the document that had torn the Graves family apart. But there were no earth-shattering revelations. It read like a traditional will. Nothing left out. Everything had been left to Constance. No surprise. This couldn't be it. I flipped the final page over to gather the documents back up. The motion caused a small envelope to drop into my lap. It had been attached to the will with a rusty paper clip. I picked it up and turned it over to see Constance's name written in the script on the front. I carefully pulled out the sheets of paper and brought my flashlight up to the faded handwriting, my heart beating painfully in my chest. I had to read the letter slowly. Truthfully, I didn't want to believe what was written in those pages. I found myself going over every sentence, questioning every word. I wanted to reject all of it. The implications were too terrible, too sad. But the more I read, I knew I couldn't deny what it was telling me. All all the pieces fit. When I finally reached the end, I rocked back on the hand I had pressed to the floor and looked into the darkness of the house, searching for the spirit hidden from my sight. Constance, I whispered, how could you? Uh-oh. All right, chapter 39. Here we go. My dearest Constance, as you well know, I am no longer for this earth. My last will and testament has been signed and remains in the hands of our attorney, Bartholomew Barnes. It is at this instance I write the letter. Despite having spoken my intentions to you directly, as your sisters and brothers will be shocked by my decision to make you my sole beneficiary, you know it was never my intention to make you a target for their ill will. But once again Bartholomew insisted that any attempt to legally mandate my wishes would not stand up in court. Therefore, it is up to you to act as my surrogate. I have not been an exemplary father by any stretch of the imagination. And while I realize anything I do now is both too little and too late, I cannot rest peacefully knowing I did not at least try to make a difference in my children's lives. I also know you love your siblings as well as any mother could love her own children. It is this fact alone that gives me solace. I know you will communicate what follows. I know you will communicate what follows to each of your siblings. To my oldest son, Rip Jr., the day you were born was the happiest your mother and I had ever experienced. To be gifted with such a healthy, fine boy was a wish to come true. Giving you my name was one of the proudest moments of my life. Your mother and I had such hopes and dreams for you. Hopes and dreams I lost sight of when she died. I know you must have felt growing up there was little you could do right in my eyes. I am deeply sorry for having fostered that belief in you, son. What's more, as you were so close in age to Constance, it must have been very difficult for you to feel any of the maternal love she tried to share with you. You perhaps suffered the most from the loss of your mother. I'm afraid this lack of love, affection, and approval has turned you into a petty young man, who demands respect and admiration from others when it has not been earned. This is why I am not leaving you the family home. I am afraid you have taken our family's role as founder of Evenfall and turned it into some sort of antiquated birthright. I realize these will be difficult words to take in from me, the failed man who is your father, but I deliver this harsh condemnation out of a place of love. True esteem and self-respect come from achieving something on your own. I will not limit you further by gifting you unearned respect. I'm sorry. I will not limit you further by gifting you unearned respect. I know you can be the man I never was. If you take these words to heart, please consider them carefully. I love you. To my son John, please know, the moment you came to us, your mother and I knew you were a tender soul with a heart too fine for this world. You had your mother's kindness and gentleness. I only wish she had lived longer, so you could have known her better. You were kindred spirits in both your temperaments and, of course, your love of animals. I know how badly you wish to fulfill your mother's desire for a hobby farm that cares for neglected animals, and I want this for you too, son. And it shall be yours once you have left home and pursued your dream of a career in veterinary science. I know you can do this. Your teacher always remarked on your strong, adept mind. I also know you are shy and that it is far easier for you to hide from the world than it is to put yourself out in it. But the world deserves to know a little of your great heart. So consider this a gentle nudge out of the nest. The moment you receive your degree, Constance has agreed to gift you the land associated with Graves' house. She has also been instructed by me to pay any costs associated with your education. I love you, son. To my youngest, Mary, let me first begin by saying what a terrible tragedy life has dealt you. To never know the angel you had as a mother, and to be left with a grieving father who allowed himself to be turned into a bitter old man. I've heard it said that people who are hurt often hurt others, and that was certainly true in my case. I thank the good Lord every day you were given Constance to show you some of your love and comfort families should naturally provide. At this time I am also leaving you nothing. I fear the man you have chosen to make your husband. I believe him to be a cruel and domineering type, the type of man I am ashamed to say I modeled for you, if to a lesser extent. If I were to leave you any money now, I believe he would spend it recklessly, leaving you with nothing. Constance has agreed to keep a sum of money dedicated to you should you ever choose to leave your husband. This money should help you rebuild your life into something I pray will be both safe and loving. I realize this meager gift from your father does not make up for all the neglect and pain you have suffered from the time of your birth, but it is all I have to give, though I was never able to properly show it. I love you, Mary. Constance, I know I have placed an enormous burden upon you from the time your mother died until now, but I am trusting you to enact these wishes. You have been both mother and father to your siblings, trying to provide them with love, care, and support when I could not. For this I will be both eternally grateful and remorseful. I am painfully aware that while you cared for your siblings, there was no one to care for you. I hope, now that I am close to death, you will be able to build your own life, perhaps with that Benjamin of yours, and have the happiness you so richly deserve. I pray your siblings always remember the sacrifices you made for this family, and not only while they were growing up, but in these last few years you have cared for me. I have been a terrible burden, I know this, and you have borne it gracefully. Please allow your siblings to read this letter. I am not convinced they appreciate the full breadth of your sacrifice, and they should. I love you, my daughter. Your father, Rupert Graves, Sr. Wow. After reading the letter a second time, I found the sadness was still there, but other emotions were now finding their way to the surface. Sympathy, disbelief, anger that Rip Graves Sr. had spoken to his children while he was still alive, and anger at Constance for not sharing her father's final words. So many lives could have turned out differently if Constance had followed through on her father's wishes. Maybe she had tried, but if I were to guess, I didn't think any of her siblings had read this letter. Now came the question of what I was supposed to do with it. The letter needed to be shared, but how was I supposed to do that without implicating my family any further? And speaking of my family, there was nothing there that would clear Nora. This letter had been hidden from Constance's siblings, so it couldn't even contribute to a motive. I restacked the papers, meaning to put them all back, when I realized there was another file tightly wedged at the bottom of the box. I pried it out and placed it on my lap. I gasped softly when I read the stamp at the top of the page. Evenfall Town Records. It was proof of ownership for 6 burial spots in the Graves family plot. Rupert and Catherine Graves had already been buried in 2, but there were 4 more for their children. Given the historic nature of the graveyard, it was still owned and operated by Given the historic nature of the graveyard, it was still owned and operated by the town. It all looked pretty straightforward. Constance must have inherited ownership of the plot along with the rest of the estate. I flipped the page. There was an addendum attached. It took a moment to sort through the legalese, but once I had, I jumped to my feet, sending the other files sliding to the floor. The addendum stipulated that, other than Constance, no other person was allowed to be buried in the Graves family plot. Rupert and Catherine had obviously wanted their children to be buried in the family gravesite, so it was a cruel move on Constance's part. But I knew she could be cruel. She had proved that by not sharing her father's letter. I also knew this addendum would anger all of the Graves siblings. But if I was right, it would have upset one of them much more than the others. But it wasn't possible. Not unless... My blood ran cold. I had done it again. Or rather, before. I had missed something right in front of me. I stuffed all the papers back into the box. I had to go right away. If I was right, it would change everything. Ooh. Okay, chapter 40. I pedaled through the empty streets, cold wind once again rushing over my face. I twisted the handles of my bike, wanting to wring my own neck. I had been so sure, I hadn't even questioned it. As I neared my destination, I guided my bike up off of the road onto the sidewalk, bumping over the cracks I had caused just the other day. I skidded to a stop. The gold lettering of the bookstore shone in the light of the lamppost. Lovely leaves. I dropped my bike to the ground and hurried over to the window, pressing my nose against the glass. My hands kept on either side of my face. I tried to see through the back of the store, but the shop was all shadows and gloom. I raced over to the door. I didn't want to disturb Theo. I knew this would upset her, but it was too important to leave. I banged the wood frame with the side of my fist and waited. Nothing inside stirred. I banged again. Still nothing. I raced around the side of the building. Theo's car was gone. She often spent the night with her sister. Now what was I going to do? The key! I dug my hand into my jacket pocket and fumbled for my keychain. It only took a second to sort out the brass one I had kept from the bookstore. I shoved it in the lock and gave it a turn. When I turned, the deadbolt slid back. I pressed down on the latch and stepped inside, closing the door quickly behind me. Thea would forgive me for the intrusion. She would understand. Actually, she would be heartbroken if I was right about this, but it needed to be done. I blinked in the darkness and took a step towards the back of the store. The edge of my book clipped the tower of books, spilling them across the floor. I stepped over the fallen stack and headed toward the narrow gap between the two large shelves. With every step I felt like the walls were closing in, but the shine from the glass front of the grandfather clock was standing tall against the back of the wall drove me forward. For an instant I wanted to be wrong. Yes, I wanted to prove Nora's innocent. And yes, I wanted justice for Constance despite everything she had done. But as I rose my gaze to the clock's face, my knees feeling like they might give way, sorry. I found myself wishing none of it to be true. Knowing who the killer was also meant knowing how and why it had all gone wrong. I stared at the clock's frozen hands. I checked my own wristwatch to be sure, but I already knew. The clock had stopped at 9:57. Theo probably looked at the time before she had gone to bed. The clock stood right beside the door that led to her apartment. She would have remarked how late it was, but the clock had stopped. Maybe that morning, or the day before, or the day before that. Theo never took notice of these types of things. She wasn't interested in the mundane details of life. I had been the one to wind the clock. She probably only noticed it that night because she had been taken out of her routine. The stillness of the bookstore fell over me. It suddenly felt too quiet, too ordinary. It was as though I couldn't quite fathom how the earth kept spinning, when there was such a tragedy playing out in the lives of everyday people. I had been right, but it all felt very wrong. Okay, we're going to end there. Stay tuned for tomorrow, where we'll do chapters 41 through 45. It's getting good. I think she knows. So if anybody has any, comment below and let me know if you know who did it, if you have an idea, because I'm a little bit, mm, I kind of don't know for sure. Anyway, have a great evening. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.